Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to another episode of NOLA Untold. I'm your host, Esplanade Ed, New Orleans' #1 tour guide, and I'm here to dig up the dirt, unearth the secrets, and spill the tea on the real history of New Orleans. Tonight, we're going to continue our series on the history of Esplanade Avenue. We will focus our discussion this evening on the downriver side of the 500 block, but more importantly, this is where the worlds of slaves, slaveholders, and free people of color collide. Let's jump right into it. Leading the downriver 500 block of Esplanade is number 503, home of Checkpoint Charlie. In the 1830s, this corner of Decatur and Esplanade was built and owned by Julian LaCroix, the pioneering free man of color we discussed on our first episode. Back then, what is now Checkpoint Charlie used to be the Louisiana Ballroom. LaCroix used to hold quadrant balls there, and this is where we pause because this requires a more nuanced discussion about race in New Orleans during those times. What is a quadrant and what is a quadrant ball? A quadrant was a person with 1/4 black ancestry and 3/4 white ancestry. By the 1830s, New Orleans had a large free people of color population. One of, but not all of the things that contributed to this was the concubining system of passage in New Orleans during that time. The passage system was first developed by the French in Saint-Domingue. France tried and failed to send suitable wives over to the colony for men. French women at the time did not want to leave the comfort of their lives for the brutal environment of an undeveloped colony. Therefore, by 1743, they developed a new policy. During that time, premarital sex with an intended white bride was not societally permissible, so Frenchmen were allowed to cohabitate with women of color. This was the beginnings of passage, which by then made its way to New Orleans. In New Orleans, due to the wealth and the aristocracy of the French and Spanish colonists, passage evolved into a refined societal practice. Women of color who were in passage relationships were provided housing, financially taken care of, and children produced by the union were given the best educations. Therefore, mixed-race children of these unions became the center of the class of free people of color, or jeunes de couleur libre, as they were called here in New Orleans. That brings us to the quadrant, or passage ball. These were social events designed to present mixed-race women to wealthy white men. Again, the history of passage balls can be traced back to the French Saint-Domingue. By the 1790s, New Orleans was having quadrant balls that were open to both white men and free men of color. In 1805, Albert Tessier from Saint-Domingue began renting a dance hall where he had 2 balls a week that were for quadrant women and white men only. The balls were popular and of the finest elegance, with the goal of the quadrant woman attending the ball to become a placée, or mistress of one of the white Creole men. If a man found a woman of his liking, he would typically enter contract negotiations with the woman's mother. Terms usually included money paid to the mother, a house and money for the quadrant herself, recognition for any children, as well as financial and education support for the children. Probably the most famous placée was Eulalie de Mandeville, the half-sister to Marigny neighborhood founder Bernard de Marigny. Eulalie already had great wealth being a Marigny heir, but at age 22, she was entered into a passage relationship with Eugene de McCarty, who just so happened to be the uncle of the infamous Delphine Lalaurie. Eulalie's fortune continued to grow while with McCarty. In 1808, Eulalie and McCarty moved to 1241 Barrack Street in the French Quarter and lived there for the rest of their lives. She established an import business, invested money in stocks, real estate, and discounted banknotes. She owned 32 slaves and was the largest slaveholder among free people of color in New Orleans. By 1830, she had a fortune of about $4 million in today's estimates. Interesting enough, when McCarty died in 1845, Delphine Lalaurie and some other McCarty relatives contested his will, claiming it was illegal for a white man to will more than 10% of his assets to a colored mistress. However, the court ruled in Eulalie's favor and she received everything. Eulalie passed away in 1848 and is listed among the wealthiest black entrepreneurs in the U.S. between 1820 and 1865. Another example of passage is 529 Esplanade. These 2 houses were built in 1856 for Lucy Cheatham, a free woman of color on land inherited by her sons through her passage relationship with John Hagan. John Hagan was a wealthy cotton planter and slave owner. Lucy built the houses with her own money and made all the decisions in their construction. On our next episode, we will continue our discussion and talk about the slave trade, how it impacted Esplanade Avenue, and reveal stories and histories you don't want to miss. If you want to learn more, go to my website at www.esplanadeed.com and book one of my tours. They go more in depth, and they are so much fun. You can check out my Crescent City Chronicle blog on my website as well. It is all sorts of cool New Orleans history. Until next time, keep it curious, folks. And remember, the real history of New Orleans is waiting to be discovered, one untold story at a time.